I never thought I'd find myself sitting in this mess, but here I am, replaying the worst day of my life over and over. It started out like any other funeral, a somber, cold, gray morning, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes every breath feel heavy. My father had just died, a good man who built this family with his own hands. We were gathered in the church, everybody quiet, head bowed, when I first caught sight of her. Her name's Lisa. We'd been married for 10 years, but that day she looked different. She was standing near my brother, James, whispering close, their heads almost touching. I'd seen her glance at him too many times to count, but I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was just too grief-stricken to see clearly. But then I saw her hand brush his arm, and the way she smiled, soft, intimate, almost secretive. It hit me like a fist to the gut. I froze. My stomach turned ice cold. I wanted to scream, to run over and demand an explanation. Instead, I just stared. A part of me refused to believe what I was seeing. But then I saw her. Lean in, whisper something, and James chuckled softly like they had some inside joke. That's when I knew she was cheating on me, on my father's funeral. My own wife betraying me while I was trying to hold it together. I clenched my fists so tightly, my nails dug into my palms. Every part of me wanted to confront her then and there, but I couldn't. My knees felt weak, and my head was buzzing with rage and hurt. How was I supposed to sit through that service, knowing she was lying, cheating behind my back? It was like someone had lit a fire inside my chest, and I was too stunned to do anything but watch them get closer. When the service ended, I told myself I'd just keep it together a little longer. I needed to get home, breathe, think. But I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. That night I stayed up, going through everything, the messages on her phone, the pictures she'd saved, the tiny clues I'd overlooked before. That's when I found the proof I needed. Her phone was unlocked, lying on the kitchen table. I saw the messages, flirty, suggestive, way too familiar. Words that should have been reserved for someone she loved, not my brother. There, right in black and white, was proof of their affair. I could smell the faint scent of her perfume when I picked up the phone, a sick, sweet reminder of her lies. I felt my stomach churn. My hands trembled as I held the phone, staring at their stupid, reckless words. It wasn't just betrayal, it was treachery. I'd spent days trying to hold everything together, and now I was sitting on a mountain of broken pieces. The funeral, my father's memory, my marriage, everything was tainted. I kept asking myself how I missed these signs, how I was so blind. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her whispering with him, their faces so close I could see the smirk she tried to hide. The worst part, I knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't pretend this was just a mistake or a fling. It was sabotage, pure and simple, and I was the one left in the wreckage. I knew then I had to do something, not just to get revenge, but to take back some control. I couldn't let her get away with it, not after everything we'd been through. I had to make her pay. The first step was obvious. I needed to confront her, face her betrayal head-on. But I wasn't planning to do it the way everyone expected. I wanted to make her regret the day she ever crossed me. The plan started forming then, as I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. I'd make her see that her actions had consequences. She'd regret betraying me in the worst way. I didn't care about legality, about sounding crazy. I just wanted her to feel the weight of her lies. And when I was done, I'd walk away, not just with my dignity intact, but with a lesson she wouldn't forget. I could feel the anger bubbling up again, hotter than before. I clenched my fists, my palms sweating. All I needed was a plan, and I'd make sure it played out exactly as I envisioned. She thought she could get away with it, that her betrayal was secret enough. But she had no idea what I was capable of, how far I'd go to make her pay. The next morning, I started gathering everything I'd need, clues, evidence, a few contacts I knew I could count on. I wasn't going to rush. This was going to be precise, calculated. She'd see that I was in control. I'd turn the tables so completely she wouldn't even know what hit her. And all the while, I kept replaying that moment in my head, the sight of her whispering with him, the betrayal dripping from her smile. I felt it in my bones. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming what was mine, about making her understand that no one crosses me and gets away clean. Not now, not ever. If she thought I was broken, she was dead wrong. Because now I was just getting started. The more I thought about it, the clearer my plan became. I didn't want some messy, public confrontation that would blow everything apart in front of everyone. That might feel good in the moment, but it wouldn't serve my purpose. I needed her to understand that I knew that I had the upper hand, and I needed her to feel the destruction I could unleash, not just emotionally, but practically. First thing I did was to get into her phone again when I knew she'd be out or busy. I wanted to see if she'd slipped up or left any trace of her betrayal. It didn't take long. I found a secret folder, an encrypted one, but I'd done enough hacking over the years to get in. Inside were pictures, messages, and even a few receipts for their secret rendezvous. I felt my stomach tighten again, but I forced myself to keep calm. There was a picture of her, sitting close to James, their faces barely inches apart. Their eyes sparkled with something I'd never seen between them before, and the caption was just a heart emoji. That was it. Just one tiny symbol, but it said everything. I could see her lips trembling slightly, the way she leaned into him a little too eagerly. I couldn't believe I'd missed all of this. I'd been so wrapped up in grief, so consumed by losing father, I'd turned a blind eye. That's how they got away with it, by sneaking behind my back when I was at my most vulnerable. I clenched my fists so tight my nails bit into my palms. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about betrayal on a level I'd never imagined. And then the real kicker hidden among her messages was a plan. A message she'd sent James saying something about getting away with it finally. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was her admitting it right there in black and white. They'd planned this, conspired behind my back to wreck what little trust I had left. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her delete or hide anything. I needed proof that couldn't be argued with. So I downloaded everything, screenshots, files, saved the photos. I even set up a little hidden camera in the living room, just in case she tried to cover her tracks further. This was war, and I wasn't going to lose it. That night, I sat in the dark, going over every detail. The plan was simple but effective. I wanted her to see that I knew everything, that I had enough evidence to destroy her if I wanted to. I would confront her when she least expected it, tell her I had all her secrets, and make her face what she'd done. The next day, I called her at work, telling her I needed to talk. She sounded surprised, maybe even a little nervous, but she agreed to come home early. I could see her fidgeting as she walked in, maybe sensing something was wrong. She was acting different, too cautious, glancing around like she was planning her next move. I met her in the living room. Her eyes flicked to her phone, then away, trying to hide something. I didn't give her the chance to deny it. I just pulled out the evidence, her secret folder, the screenshots, the message printouts. Her face went pale. "Are you serious?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Dead serious," I said coldly. "You've been lying to me from the start. I saw everything, you and James, the messages, the plans. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" She stammered, trying to deny it, but the truth was clear. Her hands shook as she tried to grab her phone, but I was quicker. I held up the evidence. "You thought you could get away with this, didn't you?" I said, voice low but deadly. "You betrayed my father's memory, our family, and me. And for what? A few stolen moments. You're damn lucky I'm not a violent man." Eyes flooded with tears, but I didn't care. I was finally seeing her for who she really was, nothing more than a liar, a cheat, someone who'd destroy everything for her own pleasure. This was only the beginning. I'd made my move, but I knew the fallout was coming. She looked at me, trembling, and whispered, "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "You had your chance to tell me, to come clean. Now I'm done. I want you out of my house today." And just like that, her world started falling apart. She begged, pleaded, but I'd already made my decision. No more excuses, no more hiding. I handed her the keys to her car, told her to take whatever she wanted and never come back. Watching her leave, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The house was quiet now, colder, emptier. My stomach twisted again, but this time with a strange sense of clarity. I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible, but I'd also taken control. I'd shown her that I wasn't someone to mess with. As I sat alone in that empty house, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself, about finally seeing the truth and not pretending anymore. I didn't need her, I didn't need that family. What I needed was to move on and rebuild on my own terms. The worst had happened, but I was still standing. That was the real victory. After she left, I stayed in that silence, feeling the weight of everything crashing down around me. My hands were still trembling as I sat on the edge of the sofa, staring at the empty doorway where she'd just walked out. The house suddenly felt huge and hollow, the kind of quiet that echoes through your bones. I kept thinking about her face, that look of shock and betrayal. It wasn't satisfaction, exactly. More like a cold, hard realization that I'd never trusted her again, not truly. I told myself I'd be better off without her, that somehow I'd finally take back control of my life. But beneath that, a darker feeling lurked. I felt hollowed out, like the betrayal had carved out a piece of me that I wouldn't get back. I'd always believed in loyalty in family, but now I saw how fragile those things really are. They can crumble so easily, especially when someone you love turns out to be the one tearing it apart. I stayed up that night, going through the evidence one last time, trying to figure out what to do next. I was angry, no, furious. Every time I looked at those messages, I saw her lying, smirking, enjoying her secret life. I thought about her touching my brother, how close they had been behind my back. It was like I'd been punched in the chest every time I remembered, but I had to stay focused. Revenge wasn't just about making her feel terrible, it had to teach her a lesson. She thought she could betray me and get away with it, but I wasn't going to let that stand. I started planning my next move, how I was going to make her regret her choices, not by yelling or throwing punches, but by showing her I was in control. The best part was I had allies, not friends. I didn't trust anyone anymore. But I knew a guy, Danny, who had a reputation for being discreet, and he owed me a favor. I went to see him the following day, told him what I needed. His eyes lit up with a mixture of surprise and satisfaction when I showed him the evidence. "You sure you want to do this?" Danny asked, leaning in close. "It could get ugly." "Ugly," I echoed, feeling the cold steel of resolve settling in. It's about time she saw what she's really made of. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about making her understand she can't betray me and walk away like nothing happened. He nodded, smirking a little. "All right, I'll get to work. But remember, once I start, there's no turning back." I told him exactly what I wanted. I wanted her to realize that her secrets had been exposed, that her lies were out. I wanted her to feel trapped, to see her life unravel without me lifting a finger. The plan was simple: discreetly send her a package. Inside would be a USB drive with all her messages, her photos, her plans, and a final note, a warning that I knew everything. The idea was to leave her with her own guilt, her own paranoia, to let her know that her betrayal was just a mistake. It was a reckoning. I wanted her to wake up every day wondering who was watching, who knew her secrets. That's what revenge was all about, making her feel vulnerable. It took a couple of days, but Danny delivered the package. I watched from a distance as she opened it at her new place, her face draining of color when she saw what was inside. Her hands trembling, she played the drive, and her eyes widened when she saw all the footage and messages. I saw the moment she realized I had won. That's when I knew I'd done enough. I'd handed her her own nightmare, and I'd done it without even confronting her directly again. I wanted her to feel the helplessness, to understand that trust was shattered beyond repair. Now I only had to wait for the fallout, for her to come crawling back, or for her to disappear entirely. Either way, I had already taken back the power I'd lost. The house was empty, her things boxed up for her to pick up or forget, and the tangle of betrayal was out in the open. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if I'd gone too far, but then I'd remember her face, the betrayal, the lies, and I'd feel a strange sense of relief. It was over. I was finally rid of that poison, and maybe, just maybe, I'd start to rebuild from this ruin. One thing was clear: I'd never trust her again, not after what I'd seen and what I'd done. Trust, once broken like that, can't be fixed, and I was finally at the point where I didn't want to try. I wanted her to feel what I felt: helpless, exposed, and utterly alone. That's the truth. When someone crosses that line, you have to decide whether to forgive or to fight. I chose the latter, and I wasn't done yet. A week passed, and the silence in my house was deafening. No calls, no texts, no sign of her coming back. Honestly, I didn't miss her. The house felt less heavy, less like a trap, but I knew better than to think it was over. Betrayal leaves scars, and revenge is just the first step in trying to heal. I kept busy during those days, working late, hitting the gym harder than usual, anything to distract myself from the gnawing ache inside. But I also kept my eyes open. Even in her absence, I wasn't naive enough to think she wasn't desperate to reach out. I had my phone set up with a burner number. If she called, I'd be ready. One evening, I was sitting at my desk poring over some paperwork when I saw a text pop up. Nothing from her directly, just a number I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted. I hesitated, but then pulled out the burner phone and read the message. "You win, but I want to talk, please." I stared at it for a long moment. The words felt like a punch in the gut. The girl I'd married begging for a conversation after everything she'd done. I was tempted to ignore it, to block her completely. But part of me wanted to hear what she had to say, see if she'd finally admit she'd fucked up or if she'd try to spin her way out of it. I typed back, cold and deliberate, "Too late for talking, you had your chance." The reply came almost immediately, "Please, I know I screwed up. I just want to explain. That was enough, I wasn't about to give her a free pass, but I also needed to see how deep her guilt really was. Maybe, just maybe, she'd try to beg her way back into my good graces, or at least give me some closure. The next day she showed up at my office unannounced. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed, and her hand shook a little as she approached me. I didn't say a word at first, I just looked at her, waiting. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, voice trembling. "No," I said, voice flat. "You already had your chance, Lisa. You showed me who you really are." She paused, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I know I fucked up, I was stupid. I wasn't myself, and I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was lonely and I—" "Stop," I cut her off sharply. "You lied, cheated, and betrayed me when I was at my most vulnerable. You think a sorry will fix that? It doesn't." Her shoulders trembled and she looked like she might break apart right there. But I was done. My stomach clenched at the sight of her desperation. I'd seen enough to know I'd won this round, but I also knew I couldn't keep her hanging. "Here, what's going to happen?" I said calmly but firmly. "You're going to pack up your things today and you're leaving for good. I've already handed you everything you need: keys, money, your clothes. I want you gone, and I don't want to hear from you again." She nodded meekly, silent now, accepting her fate. I watched her go, a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness swelling inside me. Because I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning of something else, something I hadn't yet figured out. That night I sat alone again, feeling the last of her presence drain out of the house. It was quiet but not peaceful, just a void. The kind of silence that makes you confront everything you've lost, everything you've gained. I realized I was finally free from her lies, her betrayal, the fake smiles. But the scars she left, they'd take time to heal. I poured myself a drink, settled into my chair, and stared into the dark. My mind kept circling back to that day, the funeral, the betrayal, her face as she slipped away. I thought about how I'd been so blindsided, thinking I knew everything, only to find out I was living with a lie. I knew I had to be careful moving forward. Trust was gone, and I'd learned the hard way that people can hide their true selves behind pretty smiles. Still, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This was my reset button. I could finally start rebuilding. Not with her, not with the family I thought I knew, but on my own terms. Revenge was just the first step. Now I had to figure out what came next, how to pick up the pieces and be whole again. That was the real challenge. I'd been betrayed so deeply, I wondered if I'd ever be able to look at anyone the same way again. But deep down, I knew I had no choice but to try. And I was ready to do just that. The house was eerily quiet after she left. The silence pressed down on me like a heavy blanket, but I welcomed it. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without that constant gnawing feeling of betrayal. Still, I knew better than to think I was completely free. The scars, her treachery had left, didn't just vanish overnight. I had to confront the aftermath, deal with the pain, and make sure I was truly moving forward. I spent the next few days doing what I'd avoided, really looking at myself in the mirror. Not just the reflection, but the person I'd become during all this chaos. I'd always been confident, steady. But now I felt hollowed out, like her betrayal had hollowed out the core of who I was. I clenched my fists, feeling the tightness in my palms. I needed to rebuild that strength piece by piece. I also started reaching out to some people I trusted, old friends, a counselor. Talking helped, even if only a little. But what really kept me grounded was that feeling deep inside that I had taken back control. I no longer had to wonder if she was hiding something, if I could trust her, if she was lying. The evidence, the confrontation, everything had made that clear. Still, I couldn't ignore the nagging doubt. What if she tried to come back? I knew she was probably already scheming to get herself out of this mess, to spin it into some misunderstanding or apology that would make me second-guess myself. I refused to let that happen. No, I had to be smarter. I had to cut her out completely. One afternoon, I decided to go back to the house just to clear out the last of her things. I wanted to see the space to finally say goodbye. As I moved through each room, I felt like I was walking through memories, some good, most bad. Her belongings, scattered haphazardly, felt like relics of a love I once believed in. I grabbed a box and started packing. That's when I found it. A small, crumpled envelope tucked behind a drawer in the bedroom. My stomach lurched. I hesitated, then pulled it out slowly. Inside was a handwritten note, her handwriting shaky and desperate. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you. I was lost and I thought I could fix it. Please forgive me if I ever cross your mind again. I wish things were different." Her words hit me like a punch in the chest. Forgive her, after everything. I clenched my jaw, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. I crumpled the note and threw it into the trash. That was the moment I realized her apology was just another lie, another way to manipulate, to cling on a little longer. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't let her words undo what I'd already done. I was finally free from her grip, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of returning to that toxic cycle. She made her choice, and I'd made mine. Later that evening, I sat outside on my porch, watching the sunset bleed into the sky. That's when it hit me. This was the real beginning. Not just a clean slate, but a chance to rebuild what I thought I'd lost. The betrayal had shattered so much, but it also showed me who I really was. I knew I'd have to be cautious. Trust wasn't just broken, it had to be rebuilt from scratch. But the worst was behind me. I'd taken my power back, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me again. I had the evidence, the resolve, and a new understanding of what real strength meant. And yet a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, what if she tries to come back? What if she's not done yet? I shoved that thought aside. I couldn't control her actions, only mine. I had already made the decisive move. Now I had to focus on healing and preventing myself from falling into old traps. I looked out into the darkening sky, feeling a flicker of hope. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, piece by piece, moment by moment. I'd learned the harsh truth. Sometimes, the only way to truly move on is to face the pain head-on and refuse to let it define you. That's what I intended to do. No more secrets, no more lies. Just me, standing tall in the wreckage, ready to rebuild. And I knew one thing for sure. I'd never let betrayal drag me down again. Not as long as I kept my eyes open and my heart protected. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was finally ready for it. I'd learned what I had to about trust, about strength, about myself. And most of all, I'd learned that sometimes revenge isn't about hurting the other person. It's about making sure they understand they can't control you anymore. That realization gave me a strange kind of peace. And that peace I hoped would last. The days that followed felt like a slow march toward something new, a kind of quiet rebirth. I kept my routine, stayed busy, but underneath it all, I felt that fresh sense of liberation. No more games, no more hiding, no more pretending to be fine when I was. I'd never really allowed myself to process what had happened until I finally made that decisive move, kicked her out, exposed her lies, and reclaimed my life. One morning, I woke up with a strange clarity. I knew what I had to do next. I had to sever every last tie that kept her lingering in my mind. That meant taking concrete steps to close the chapter once and for all. So I went to my lawyer, got the paperwork ready, and handed her the final cut, filing for divorce. I wanted her out of my life entirely, and I wasn't going to leave any room for doubt. I remember driving to the courthouse, feeling like I was carrying a heavy weight that suddenly lifted. The sun was shining brighter than ever, and the air smelled different, clean, sharp, almost like a fresh start. I handed over the documents, signed the papers, and watched as the clerk stamped the final decree. It was done, official. As I walked out, I felt that rare moment of satisfaction. I'd taken control of my destiny after everything. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, but I'd turned that pain into power. That's what revenge really taught me. Sometimes the best way to win is to walk away, stronger than ever, and leave the past behind. I went home that day and sat on the porch with a cold drink in hand. The house was still, but it no longer felt haunted. Instead, it was a blank slate. I decided to start fresh, to focus on myself, on what I wanted to rebuild. I took down her pictures, boxed up her belongings, and finally let go of the memories that had been holding me hostage. Looking back, I realized that betrayal teaches you some brutal lessons. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair, at least with some people. The key is knowing when to cut your losses and move forward. I learned not to wait around for apologies or explanations that would never come. Instead, I took what was mine: my dignity, my peace, my future. People often say revenge is destructive. Maybe. But for me, it was about reclaiming my self-respect, about proving that I wouldn't let her betrayal define me. I'd been knocked down, yes, but I got up stronger. I refused to be a victim of her lies. I exacted my justice, not through violence or revenge in its raw form, but by making her see she couldn't control me anymore. Now I focus on rebuilding what I lost, slowly, carefully, without rushing. I know the scars will stay, but they'll fade with time. I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about accepting and moving on. And I've also learned a hard truth: sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply walking away and refusing to let someone's betrayal destroy your life. I don't hate her anymore. I don't even feel the urge to retaliate beyond what I've already done. What I do feel now is a quiet confidence, a certainty that I'm better off without the poison she brought into my life. I've got no room for betrayal, no space for lies. I'm done with that chapter. As I sit here, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, I realize I've finally found peace. Not the kind that comes from revenge, but the kind that comes from reclaiming your own story. I've learned that sometimes the only way to win is to walk away, strong and unbroken. And that's exactly what I've done. The pain will fade. The scars will remain, but they'll serve as a reminder, not of betrayal, but of the strength it took to survive, to rebuild, and to finally say, I am enough.